I would like to begin this video with a land acknowledgement. We wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron, Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Nothing I say is necessarily directly affiliated with the University of Toronto. I'm just using the land acknowledgement from my school. Thank you.
So, ethical dilemmas and situational judgment. So, big overview here for how this structure is going to go. You're going to stop and pause, restate the question, or restate in your own words. Then go on to principles or values. Then you're going to talk about the people and stakeholders, move on to your options, and finally wrap up with your concrete plan. So let's get into it. Number one, pause and restate. So everybody's going to sound a little bit cheesy, but you're going to be saying that this is challenging because, and you're going to restate what the situation is saying. Next, you're going to go on to the principles. And so you're going to discuss that. You remember how I brought up the 4 pillars of ethical principles in medicine? You're going to choose the ethical principles that are present within the given scenario or question that you're presented with. So this is where you're going to present that. So number 3, you're going to talk about the people and stakeholders. So I'm sure there's going to be a couple different people in with whatever situation you're presented with. So you're going to have the main person in the situation. Maybe it's going to be their family that's also involved, community members. Maybe you yourself is involved. So you're going to talk about the people that are involved. And this shows that you're able to take on different perspectives and you're able to be empathetic. Next, you're going to talk about the different types of options. And so this is when you're doing your if-then statements. So if I do this, then this could happen. And so with this, you're showing the potential risks and benefits associated with any type of option that you end up choosing. Finally, or I guess second to finally, you're going to talk about the plan. You need to make sure you have a concrete plan. Yes, in the previous section, you're talking about all the different potential perspectives and all the possibilities if then, but in the end, you need to show that you're not just a talker, you're somebody who can execute a plan. So you're going to show the things that are necessary for this plan to go forward, and then you're going to justify it, but also talk about the potential drawbacks that you see. Finally, you can do a medicine tie-in. So you might not always get the chance to do this, but if you do, it's great. What lesson did you take away from this situation? And how are you going to apply that to medical school? And overall, why is this something that's important to talk about in medicine? So that wraps up your situational judgment type questions, and I'll come back and show you how I'd answer an example of these questions.
So take a moment to pause the video, read through the question, and try working through it using the framework previously discussed. When you're ready, come back to the video and see how I've answered the question for comparison. Don't worry if your answer is not exactly the same as mine. Even mine is not perfect. I did answer it in the same way that you would be answering it in the real thing, so I didn't have anything in front of me. I just tried my best to use the ethical framework to answer the question.
So in this situation, it is very difficult just because we have 2 parents who disagree with how to proceed with caring for their child medically. And so we have the mother who is deaf and sees being deaf as part of her cultural identity. And then we have a father who would like their child to go ahead and get the cochlear implant. This is difficult just because it touches on the principle of autonomy. So we're considering the autonomy of both parents as well as the child in the future for this situation. It's also difficult just because, unlike other situations where there's harm that can come to the patient if we don't act, this is not going to cause the child to deteriorate physically in any way. So it is going to be a decision that we have to collaborate on. And so I'm going to have to think about the perspective of the mother who considers this to be a cultural identity for her. If I think about if someone were to ask me if I could change the race or the gender of my child in order to make it easier for them in the future, I would be very offended by that, right? So I can completely empathize with where the mother is coming from. But then I could also see where the father is coming from in wanting to make it a bit of an easier life for their child. Even though it is a cultural identity to be deaf, not everybody is able to use sign language. And so inherently, it is going to be a little bit more difficult, but not impossible for their child to live without this cochlear implant. And then I also want to think about the child who in the future may have wanted the cochlear implant. However, this is a time sensitive procedure, which, if not done at this time, may not have the most benefit if done later on. And so, how do I proceed? So, I might want to go ahead and side with the mom just because I want to protect her cultural identity. But in that way, I'm denying the father of his authority over his daughter as well. I might want to go ahead and side with the father just because that better aligns with medical practices in trying to maybe air quotes fix this situation. But this takes away the autonomy of the mother and her ability to have authority in her child's life as well. And that's a harmful way to think just because this isn't something to just fix. So I think the best course of action is to have a balanced approach where I collaborate with everybody in the situation. So that means the mom, I want to hear more about what she fears if her child goes ahead and gets this cochlear implant. I want to hear from the father about what he fears if she doesn't go ahead and get the cochlear implant. And then I also want to hear from other specialists on this topic, whether that be somebody in speech language pathology, somebody who works in audiology, maybe even ethics, to get a better way to try to come to a fair approach to deciding on the next best step. But I don't want to go ahead and jump to any conclusions, and I don't want to include any legal authority, just because that's not necessary in this situation, especially when no physical harm is going to be coming to the child either way. So it's just going to be something where we have to talk about what the possible outcomes are going to be. But in my role as a doctor, I'm not there to place any judgment or value on one decision either way. When I do work as a doctor in the future, I'm going to come across different situations where a patient may not align with our Western biomedical model, and I have to respect that. My role is to provide them with all the information necessary for them to make a balanced decision. So that's what I take away from this situation, and that's how I hope to practice in the future as a doctor. Thank you for your time and your question.
So that's how I would answer this question, but I'm super curious to know how you guys answered it. Was it similar to mine? Was it different in any way? If it was different, how so? What do you think I should have done differently? I know my answer is not perfect, but I do think that this would be decent, especially if you were nervous on interview day. I think that this would be a pretty decent response. I'm sure there's a lot more that I could have included or different ways I could have stated the answer. So I definitely would love to hear from you guys as to what you would suggest. And I would love to hear from you what you think should be added in the steps if you think that there's something missing in the framework. So comment down below, give this video a like, and share with your friends if you know that they're also preparing for med school interviews. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you back for the other videos. Bye!